Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. We are continuing reading the private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner by James Hogg. This is part 7. My time was now much occupied, along with my reverend preceptor, in making ready for the approaching trial as the prosecutors. Our counsel assured us of a complete victory, and that banishment would be the mildest award of the law on the offender. Mark how different was the result. From the shifts and ambiguities of a wicked bench who had a fellow feeling of iniquity with the defenders, my suit was cast, the graceless libertine was absolved, and I was incarcerated and bound over to keep the peace, with heavy penalties before I was set at liberty. I was exceedingly disgusted at this issue, and blamed the counsel of my friend to his face. He expressed great grief, and expatiated on the wickedness of our judiciaries, adding, "I see I cannot depend on you for quick and summary measures, but for your sake I shall be revenged on that wicked judge, and that you shall see in a few days." The Lord Justice Clerk died that same week, but he died in his own house and in his own bed. And by what means my friend effected it, I do not know. He would not tell me a single word of the matter, but the judge's sudden death made a great noise, and I made so many curious inquiries regarding the particulars of it, that some suspicions were like to attach to our family for some unfair mean used. For my part, I know nothing, and I rather think he died by the visitation of heaven, and that my friend had foreseen it, by symptoms, and soothed me by promises of complete revenge. It was some days before he mentioned my brother's meditated death to me again, and certainly he then found me exasperated against him personally to the highest degree. But I told him that I could not now think any more of it, owing to the late judgment of the court, by which if my brother were missing or found dead, I would not only forfeit my life, but my friends would be ruined by the penalties. "I suppose you know and believe in the perfect safety of your soul," said he, "and that is a matter settled from the beginning of time, and now sealed and ratified both in heaven and in earth." "I believe in it thoroughly and perfectly," said I, "and whenever I entertain doubts of it I am sensible of sin and weakness." "Very well, so then am I," said he. "I think I can now divine with all manner of certainty what will be the high and merited guerdon of your immortal part. Hear me then farther. I give you my solemn assurance, and bond of blood, that no human hand shall ever henceforth be able to injure your life, or shed one drop of your precious blood, but it is on the condition that you walk always by my directions." "I will do so with cheerfulness," said I, "for without your enlightened counsel I feel that I can do nothing. But as to your power of protecting my life, you must excuse me for doubting of it. Nay, were we in your own proper dominions, you could not ensure that." "In whatever dominion or land I am, my power accompanies me," said he, "and it is only against human might and human weapon that I ensure your life. On that will I will keep an eye, and on that you may depend. I have never broken word or promise with you. Do you credit me?" "Yes, I do," said I, "for I see you are in earnest. I believe, though I do not comprehend you." "Then why do you not at once challenge your brother to the field of honor? Seeing you now act without danger, cannot you also act without fear?" "It is not fear," returned I. "Believe me, I hardly know what fear is. It is a doubt that, on all these emergencies, constantly haunts my mind, that in performing such and such actions I may fall from my upright state. This makes fratricide a fearful task." "This is imbecility itself," said he. "We have settled and agreed on that point 100 times. I would therefore advise that you challenge your brother to single combat. I shall ensure your safety, and he cannot refuse giving you satisfaction." "But then the penalties," said I. "We will try to evade these," said he. "And supposing you should be caught, if you are a laird of Dalcastle and Balgrennan, what are the penalties to you?" "Might we not rather pop him off in private and quietness, as we did the dietistical divine?" said I. "The deed would be alike meritorious either way," said he. But we may not wait for years before we find an opportunity. My advice is to challenge him as privately as you will and there cut him off." "So be it then," said I. "When the moon is at the full, I will send for him forth to speak with one, and there will I smite him and slay him, and he shall trouble the righteous no more." "Then this is the very night," said he. "The moon is nigh to the full, and this night your brother and his sinful mates hold carousal, for there is an intended journey tomorrow. The exulting profligate leaves town, where we must remain till the time of my departure hence. And then is he safe and must live to dishonor God, and not only destroy his own soul, but those of many others. Alack, and woe is me! The sins that he and his friend will commit this very night will cry to heaven against us for our shameful delay. When shall our great work of cleansing the sanctuary be finished, if we proceed at this puny rate?" "I see the deed must be done, then," said I, "and since it is so, it shall be done. I will arm myself forthwith, and from the midst of his wine and debauchery you shall call him forth to me, and there will I smite him with the edge of the sword, that our great work be not retarded." "If thy execution were equal to thy intent, how great a man you soon might be," said he. "We shall make the attempt once more, and if it fail again, why I must use other means to bring about my high purposes relating to mankind. Home, and make ready. I will go and procure what information I can regarding their motions, and I will meet you in disguise 20 minutes hence, at the first turn of Hewie's Lane, beyond the lock." "I have nothing to make ready," said I, "for I do not choose to go home. Bring me a sword, that we may consecrate it with prayer and vows, and if I use it not to bringing down of the wicked and profane, then may the Lord so do to me and more also." We parted, and there was I left again to the multiplicity of my own thoughts for the space of 20 minutes, a thing my friend never failed in subjecting me to, and these were worse to contend with than hosts of sinful men. I prayed inwardly that these deeds of mine might never be brought into the knowledge of men who were incapable of appreciating the high motives that led to them, and then I sung part of the 10th Psalm, likewise in spirit, but for all these efforts my sinful doubts returned, so that when my illustrious friend joined me and proffered me the choice of 2 gilded rapiers, I declined accepting any of them, and began in a very bold and energetic manner to express my doubts regarding the justification of all the deeds of perfect men. He chided me severely, and branded me with cowardice, a thing that my nature never was subject to, and then he branded me with falsehood, and breach of the most solemn engagements, both to God and man. I was compelled to take the rapier, much against my inclination, but for all the arguments, threats, and promises that he could use, I would not consent to send a challenge to my brother by his mouth. There was one argument only that he made use of which had some weight with me, but yet it would not preponderate. He told me my brother was gone to a notorious and scandalous habitation of women, and that if I left him to himself for ever, so short a space longer, it might embitter his state through ages to come. This was a trying concern to me, but I resisted it and reverted to my doubts. On this he said that he had meant to do me honor, but since I put it out of his power, he would do the deed and take the responsibility on himself. "I have with sore travail procured a guardship of your life," added he. "For my own I have not. But, be that as it will, I shall not be baffled in my attempts to benefit my friends without a trial. You will at all events accompany me, and see that I get justice." "Certes, I will do thus much," said I, "and woe be to him if his arm prevail against my friend and patron." His lip curled with a smile of contempt, which I could hardly brook, and I began to be afraid that the eminence to which I had been destined by him was already fading from my view. And I thought what I should then do to ingratiate myself again with him, for without his countenance I had no life. I will be a man in act, thought I, but in sentiment I will not yield, and for this he must surely admire me the more. As we emerged from the shadowy lane into the fair moonshine, I started so that my whole frame underwent the most chilling vibrations of surprise. I again thought I had been taken at unawares and was conversing with another person. My friend was equipped in the Highland garb, and so completely translated into another being that, save by his speech, all the senses of mankind could not have recognized him. I blessed myself, and asked whom it was his pleasure to personify tonight. He answered me carelessly that it was a spark whom he meant should bear the blame of whatever might fall out tonight, and that was all that was passed on the subject. We proceeded by some stone steps at the foot of the north loch, in hot argument all the way. I was afraid that our conversation might be overheard, for the night was calm and almost as light as day, and we saw sundry people crossing us as we advanced. But the zeal of my friend was so high that he disregarded all danger, and continued to argue fiercely and loudly on my delinquency, as he was pleased to call it. I stood on one argument alone, which was that I did not think the Scripture promises to the elect taken in their utmost latitude warranted the assurance that they could do no wrong, and that therefore it is behooved every man to look well to his steps. There was no religious scruple that irritated my enlightened friend and master so much as this. He could not endure it, and the sentiments of our great covenanted reformers being on his side, there is not a doubt that I was wrong. He lost all patience on hearing what I advanced on this matter, and taking hold of me, he led me into a darksome booth in a confined entry, and after a friendly but cutting reproach, he bade me remain there in secret and watch the event. "And if I fall," said he, "you will not fail to avenge my death." I was so entirely overcome with vexation that I could make no answer, on which he left me abruptly, a prey to despair. And I saw or heard no more till he came down to the moonlight green, followed by my brother. They had quarrelled before they came within my hearing, for the first words I heard were those of my brother, who was in a state of intoxication, and he was urging a reconciliation, as was his wont on such occasions. My friend spurned at the suggestion and dared him to the combat, and after a good deal of boastful altercation, which the turmoil of my spirits prevented me from remembering, my brother was compelled to draw his sword and stand on the defensive. It was a desperate and terrible engagement. I at first thought that the royal stranger and great champion of the faith would overcome his opponent with ease, for I considered heaven as on his side, and nothing but the arm of sinful flesh against him. But I was deceived. The sinner stood firm as a rock, while the assailant flitted about like a shadow, or rather like a spirit. I smiled inwardly, conceiving that these lightsome maneuvers were all a sham to show off his art and mastership in the exercise, and that whenever they came to close fairly, that instant my brother would be overcome. Still I was deceived. My brother's arm seemed invincible, so that the closer they fought, the more palpably did it prevail. They fought round the green to the very edge of the water, and so round till they came up close to the covert where I stood. There being no more room to shift ground, my brother then forced him to come to close quarters, on which the former, still having a decided advantage, my friend quitted his sword and called out. I could resist no longer. So springing from my concealment, I rushed between them with my sword drawn and parted them as if they had been two schoolboys. Then turning to my brother, I addressed him as follows. "Wretch! Miscreant! Knowest thou what thou art attempting? Wouldst thou lay thine hand on the Lord's anointed, or shed his precious blood? Turn thee to me, that I may chastise thee for all thy wickedness, and not for the many injuries thou hast done to me." To it we went, with full thirst of vengeance on every side. The duel was fierce, but the might of heaven prevailed, and not my might. The ungodly and reprobate young man fell, covered with wounds, and with curses and blasphemy in his mouth, while I escaped uninjured. Thereto his power extended not. I will not deny that my own immediate impressions of this affair in some degree differed from this statement. But this is precisely as my illustrious friend described it to me afterwards, and I can rely implicitly on this information, as he was at that time a looker-on, and my senses all in a state of agitation, and he could have no motive for saying what was not the positive truth. Never till my brother was down did we perceive that there had been witnesses to the whole business. Our ears were then astounded by rude challenges of unfair play, which were quite appalling to me. But my friend laughed at them and conducted me off in perfect safety. As to the unfairness of the transaction, I can say thus much, that my royal friend's sword was down ere ever mine was presented. But if it still be accounted unfair to take up a conqueror and punish him in his own way, I answer, that if a man is sent on a positive mission by his master, and hath laid himself under vows to do his work, he ought not to be too nice in the means of accomplishing it. And farther, I appeal to Holy Writ, wherein many instances are recorded of the pleasure the Lord takes in the final extinction of the wicked and profane, and this position I take to be unanswerable. I was greatly disturbed in my mind for many days, knowing that the transaction had been witnessed, and sensible also of the perilous situation I occupied owing to the late judgment of the court against me. But, on the contrary, I never saw my enlightened friend in such high spirits. He assured me there was no danger, and again repeated that he warranted my life against the power of man. I thought proper, however, to remain in hiding for a week, but as he said, to my utter amazement, the blame fell on another, who was not only accused, but pronounced guilty by the general voice, and outlawed for non-appearance. How could I doubt after this that the hand of heaven was aiding and abetting me? The matter was beyond my comprehension, and as for my friend, he never explained anything that was past, but his activity and art were without a parallel. He enjoyed our success mightily, and for his sake I enjoyed it somewhat, but it was on account of his comfort only, for I could not for my life perceive in what degree the church was better or purer than before these deeds were done. He continued to flatter me with great things as to honors, fame, and emolument, and above all, with the blessing and protection of him to whom my body and soul were dedicated. But after these high promises, I got no longer peace, for he began to urge the death of my father, with such an unremitting earnestness that I found I had nothing for it but to comply. I did so, and cannot express his enthusiasm of approbation. So much did he hurry and press me in this, that I was forced to devise some of the most openly violent measures, having no alternative. Heaven spared me the deed, taking in that instance the vengeance in its own hand. For before my arm could effect the sanguine but meritorious act, the old man followed his son to the grave. My illustrious and zealous friend seemed to regret this somewhat, but he comforted himself with the reflection that still I had the merit of it, having not only consented to it, but in fact effected it, for by doing the one action I had brought about both. No sooner were the obsequies of the funeral over than my friend and I went to Dowcastle, and took undisputed possession of the houses, lands, and effects that had been my father's. But his plate and vast treasures of ready money he had bestowed on a voluptuous and unworthy creature, who had lived long with him as mistress. Fain would I have sent her after her lover, and gave my friend some hints on the occasion, but he only shook his head, and said that we must lay all selfish and interested motives out of the question. For a long time, when I awakened in the morning, I could not believe my senses, that I was indeed the undisputed and sole proprietor of so much wealth and grandeur, and I felt so much gratified, that I immediately set about doing all the good I was able, hoping to meet with all approbation and encouragement from my friend. I was mistaken. He checked the very first impulses toward such a procedure, questioned my motives, and uniformly made them out to be wrong. There was one morning that a servant said to me, there was a lady in the back chamber who wanted to speak with me, but he could not tell me who it was, for all the old servants had left the mansion, every one on hearing of the death of the late laird, and those who had come to know none of the people in the neighborhood. From several circumstances I had suspicions of private confabulations with women, and refused to go to her, but bid the servant inquire what she wanted. She would not tell. She could only state the circumstances to me. So I, being sensible that a little dignity of manner became me in my elevated situation, returned for answer, that if it was business that could not be transacted by my steward, it must remain untransacted. The answer which the servant brought back was of a threatening nature. She stated that she must see me, and if I refused her satisfaction there, she would compel it where I should not invite her. My friend and director appeared pleased with my dilemma, and rather advised that I should hear what the woman had to say, on which I consented, provided she would deliver her mission in his presence. She came in with the manifest signs of anger and indignation, and began with bold and direct charge against me of a shameful assault on one of her daughters, of having used the basest means in order to lead her aside from the paths of rectitude, and on the failure of these of having resorted to the most unqualified measures. I denied the charge in all its bearings, assuring the dame that I had never so much as seen either of her daughters to my knowledge, far less wronged them, on which she got into great wrath, and abused me to my face as an accomplished vagabond, hypocrite, and sensualist, and she went so far as to tell me roundly that if I did not marry her daughter, she would bring me to the gallows, and that in a very short time. "Marry your daughter, honest woman?" said I. "On the faith of a Christian, I never saw your daughter, and you may rest assured in this, that I will neither marry you nor her. Do you consider how short a time I have been in this place? How much that time has been occupied, and how there was even a possibility that I could have accomplished such villainies? And how long does your Christian reverence suppose you have remained in this place since the late laird's death?" said she. "That is too well known to need recapitulation," said I. "Only a very few days, though I cannot at present specify the exact number. Perhaps 30 to 40 or so. But in all that time, certes, I have never seen either you or any of your 2 daughters that you talk of. You must be quite sensible of that." My friend shook his head 3 times during this short sentence, while the woman held up her hands in amazement and disgust, exclaiming, "There goes the self-righteous one! There goes the consecrated youth who cannot err! You, sir, know that the world shall know of the faith that is in this most just, devout, and religious miscreant. Can you deny that you have already been in this place 4 months and 7 days? Or that in that time you have been forbid my house 20 times? Or that you have persevered in your endeavors to effect the basest and most ungenerous of purposes? Or that you have attained them, hypocrite and deceiver as you are? Yes, sir, I say, dare you deny that you have attained your vile, selfish, and degrading purposes towards a young and innocent and unsuspecting creature, and thereby ruined a poor widow's only hope in this world? No, you cannot look in my face and deny aught of this." "The woman is raving mad," said I. "You, illustrious sir, know that in the first instance I have not yet been in this place 1 month. My friend shook his head again and answered me, "You are wrong, my dear friend, you are wrong. It is indeed the space of time that the lady hath stated, to a day since you came here, and I came with you, and I am sorry that I know for certain that you have been frequently haunting her house, and have often had private correspondence with one of the young ladies too. Of the nature of it I presume not to know." "You are mocking me," said I. "But as well may you try to reason me out of my existence as to convince me that I have been here even 1 month, or that any of those things you allege against me as the shadow of truth or evidence to support it. I will swear to you by the great God that made me, and by—" "Hold thou most abandoned profligate," cried she violently, "and do not add perjury to your other detestable crimes. Do not for mercy's sake any more profane that name whose attributes you have wrested and disgraced. But tell me what reparation you propose offering to my injured child." "I again declare before heaven, woman, that to the best of my knowledge and recollection, I never saw your daughter. I now think I have some faint recollection of having seen your face, but where or in what place puzzles me quite." "And why?" said she. "Because for months and days you have been in such a state of extreme inebriety that your time has gone over like a dream that has been forgotten. I believe that from the day you came first to my house you have been in a state of utter delirium, and that principally from the fumes of wine and ardent spirits." "It is a manifest falsehood," said I. "I have never, since I entered on the possession of Dowcastle, tasted wine or spirits, saving once, a few evenings ago, and I confess to my shame that I was led too far, but I have craved forgiveness and obtained it. I take my noble and distinguished friend, therefore, witness to the truth of what I assert, a man who has done more and sacrificed more for the sake of genuine Christianity than any this world contains. Him you will believe." "I hope you have attained forgiveness," said he, seriously. "Indeed, it would be next to blasphemy to doubt it. But of late you have been very much addicted to intemperance. I doubt if, from the very first night you tasted the delights of drunkenness, that you have ever again been in your right mind until Monday last. Doubtless you have been for a good while most diligent in your addresses to this lady's daughter." "This is unaccountable," said I. "It is impossible that I can have been doing a thing, and not doing it at the same time. But indeed, honest woman, there have been several incidents occurred to me in the course of my life which persuade me I have a second self, or that there is some other being who appears in my likeness." Here my friend interrupted me with a sneer, and a hint that I was talking insanely. And then he added, turning to the lady, "I know my friend Mr. Cowan will do what is just and right. Go and bring the young lady to him, that he may see her, and then he will recollect all his former amours with her." "I humbly beg your pardon, sir," said I, "but the mention of such a thing as amours with any woman existing to me is really so absurd, so far from my principles, so far from the purity of nature and frame to which I was born and consecrated, that I hold it as an insult, and regard it with contempt." I would have said more in reprobation of such an idea, had not my servant entered and said that a gentleman wanted to see me on business. Being glad of an opportunity of getting quit of my lady visitor, I ordered the servant to show him in, and forthwith a little lean gentleman with a long aquiline nose and a bald head daubed all over with powder and pomatum entered. I thought I recollected having seen him too, but could not remember his name, though he spoke to me with the greatest familiarity. At least that sort of familiarity that an official person generally assumes. He bustled about and about, speaking to everyone, but declined listening for a single moment to any. The lady offered to withdraw, but he stopped her. "No, no, Mrs. Keeler, you need not go. You need not go. You must not go, madame. The business I came about concerns you. Yes, that it does. Bad business, yon of Walker's, eh? Could not help it. Did all I could, Mr. Ringham. Done your business. Have it all cut and dry here, sir. No, this is not it. I have it among them, though. I'm at a little loss for your name, sir," addressing my friend. "Seen you very often, though, exceedingly often. Quite well acquainted with you." "No, sir, you are not," said my friend sternly. The intruder never regarded him, never so much as lifted his eyes from his bundle of law papers, among which he was bustling with great hurry of importance, but went on. "Impossible! Have seen a face very like it, then. What did you say your name was, sir?" "Very like it indeed. Is not the young laird who was murdered whom you resemble so much?" Here Mrs. Keeler uttered a scream which so startled me that it seems I grew pale. And on looking at my friend's face, there was something struck me so forcibly the likeness between him and my late brother, that I had nearly fainted. The woman exclaimed that it was my brother's spirit that stood beside me. "Impossible!" exclaimed the attorney. "At least I hope not, else his signature is not worth a pin. There is some balance due on yon business, madame. Do you wish your account? Because I have it here, ready discharged, and it does not suit letting such things lie over. This business of Mr. Cowan's will be a severe one on you, madame, rather a severe one." "What business of mine, if it be your will, sir?" said I. "For my part, I never engaged you in business of any sort, less or more." He never regarded me, but went on. "You may appeal, though. Yes, there are such things as appeals for the refractory. Here it is, gentlemen. Here they are all together. Here is, in the first place, sir, your power of attorney, regularly warranted, sealed, and signed with your own hand." "I declare solemnly that I never signed that document," said I. The system of denial is not a bad one in general," said my attorney, "but at present there is no occasion for it. You do not deny your own hand." "I deny everything connected with the business," cried I. "I disclaim it in toto, and declare that I know no more about it than the child unborn." "That is exceedingly good," exclaimed he. "I like your pertinacity vastly. I have 3 of your letters, and 3 of your signatures. That part is all settled, and I hope so is the whole affair. For here is the original grant to your father, which he has never thought proper to put in requisition. Simple, gentlemen, but here have I, lawyer Lincoln, in 100th part of the time that any other notary, writer, attorney, or writer to the signet in Britain would have done it, procured the signature of His Majesty's Commissioner, and thereby confirmed the charter to you and your house, sir, for ever and ever. Begging your pardon, madame. The lady, as well as myself, tried several times to interrupt the loquacity of Lincoln, but in vain. He only raised his hand with a quick flourish and went on. Here it is. James, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, to his right trusty cousin, sendeth greeting. And whereas his right leal and trustworthy cousin, George Cowan of Dalcastle and Balgrennan, hath suffered great losses and undergone much hardship on behalf of his Majesty's rights and titles, he therefore, for himself, and as Prince and Steward of Scotland, and by the consent of his right trusty cousins and conciliars, hereby grants to the said George Cowan, his heirs and assignees, whatsoever, heritably and irrevocably, all inhale the lands and others written, to wit, all inhale the 5 merk land of Kiplerig, the 5 pound land of Easter Knockward, with all the towers, fortalices, manor places, houses, biggings, yards, orchards, tofts, crofts, mills, woods, fishings, mosses, muirs, meadows, commodities, pasturages, coals, coal hews, tenants, tenantries, services of free tenants, annexes, connexes, dependencies, parts, pinnacles, and pertinence of the same whatsoever, to be peaceably brooked, joyous, set, used, and disposed of him and his aboves, as specified heritably and irrevocably in all time coming. And in testimony thereof, his Majesty for himself, and as Prince and Steward of Scotland, with the advice and consent of his foresaid's knowledge, proper motive, and kingly power, makes, erects, creates, unites, annexes, and incorporates the whole lands above mentioned in all hail and free barony, by all the rights, meaths, and marches thereof, old and divided, as the same lies in length and breadth, in houses, biggings, mills, multures, hawkings, hunting, fishing, with court plate, herizold, fock, fork, sack, sock, thole, thame, vert, rake, wraith, ware, venison, outfang, thief, infang, thief, pit, and gallows, and all the sundry and other commodities, given at our court of Whitehall, etc., etc., God save the King. Composito 5 lib 13a, registrate 26th September 1687. See, madame, there are here 10 signatures of privy councillors of that year, and here are other 10 of the present year, with his Grace the Duke of Queensberry all the head. All right, see, here it is, sir. All right, done your work. So see, madame, this gentleman is the true and sole heritor of all the land that your father possesses, with all the rents thereof, for the last 20 years and upwards. Fine job for my employers. Sorry on your account, madame. Can't help it. I was again going to disclaim all interest or connection in the matter, but my friend stopped me, and the plaints and lamentations of the dame became so overpowering that they put an end to all farther colloquy. But lawyer Lincoln followed me and stated his great outlay and the important services he had rendered me, until I was obliged to subscribe an order to him for £100 on my banker. I was now glad to retire with my friend and ask seriously for some explanation of all this. It was in the highest degree unsatisfactory. He confirmed all that he had stated to me, assuring me that I had not only been assiduous in my endeavors to seduce a young lady of great beauty, which it seemed I had effected, but that I had taken counsel and got this supposed old false and forged grant raked up and new signed to ruin the young lady's family quite, so as to throw her entirely on myself for protection, and be wholly at my will. This was to me wholly incomprehensible. I could have freely made oath to the contrary of every particular, yet the evidences were against me, and of a nature not to be denied. Here I must confess that, highly as I disapproved of the love of women, and all intimacies and connections with the sex, I felt a sort of indefinite pleasure and ungracious delight in having a beautiful woman solely at my disposal. But I thought of her spiritual good in the meantime. My friend spoke of my backslidings with concern, requesting me to make sure of my forgiveness, and to forsake them, and then he added some words of sweet comfort. But from this time forth I began to be sick at times of my existence. I had heart-burnings, longings, and yearnings that would not be satisfied, and I seemed hardly to be an accountable creature, being thus in the habit of executing transactions of the utmost moment without being sensible that I did them. I was a being incomprehensible to myself. Either I had a second self who transacted businesses in my likeness, or else my body was at times possessed by a spirit over which it had no control, and of whose actions my own soul was wholly unconscious. This was an anomaly not to be accounted for by any philosophy of mine, and I was many times in contemplating it excited to terrors and mental torments hardly describable. To be in a state of consciousness and unconsciousness at the same time, in the same body and the same spirit, was impossible. I was under the greatest anxiety, dreading some change would take place momently in my nature, for of dates I could make nothing. 1/2 or 2/3 of my time seemed to me to be totally lost. I often about this time prayed with great fervor and lamented my hopeless condition, especially in being liable to the commission of crimes which I was not sensible of, and could not eschew. And I confess, notwithstanding the promises on which I had been taught to rely, I began to have secret terrors, and the great enemy of man's salvation was exercising powers over me that might eventually lead to my ruin. These were but temporary and sinful fears, but they added greatly to my unhappiness. The worst thing of all was, what hitherto I had never felt, and as yet durst not confess to myself, that the presence of my illustrious friend and devoted friend was becoming irksome to me. When I was by myself, I breathed freer and my step was lighter. But when he approached, a pang went to my heart, and in his company I moved and acted as if under a load that I could hardly endure. What a state to be in! And yet to shake him off was impossible. We were incorporated together, identified with one another as it were, and the power was not in me to separate myself from him. I still knew nothing who he was, farther than that he was a potentate of some foreign land, bent on establishing some pure and genuine doctrines of Christianity, hitherto only half understood, and less than half exercised. Of this I could have no doubts, after all that he had said, done, and suffered in the cause. But alongst with this, I was also certain that he was possessed of some supernatural power, of the source of which I was wholly ignorant. That a man could be a Christian, and at the same time a powerful necromancer, appeared inconsistent, and adverse to every principle taught in our church, and from this I was led to believe that he inherited his powers from on high, for I could not doubt either of the soundness of his principles, or that he accomplished things impossible to account for. Thus was I sojourning in the midst of a chaos of confusion. I looked back on my bypassed life with pain, as one looks back on a perilous journey in which he has attained his end, without gaining any advantage either to himself or others. And I looked forward as on a darksome waste, full of repulsive and terrific shapes, pitfalls and precipices, to which there was no definite bourne, and from which I turned with disgust. With my riches, my unhappiness was increased tenfold, and here with another great acquisition of property for which I had pleaded and for which I had gained in a dream, my miseries and difficulties were increasing. My principal feeling about this time was an insatiable longing for something that I cannot describe or denominate properly, unless I say it was for utter oblivion that I longed. I desired to sleep, but it was for a deeper and longer sleep than that in which the senses were nightly steeped. I longed to be at rest and quiet, and close my eyes on the past and future alike, as far as this frail life was concerned. But what had been formerly and finally settled in the councils above, I presume not to call in question. In this state of irritation and misery was I dragging on an existence, disgusted with all around me, and in particular with my mother, who with all her love and anxiety had such an insufferable mode of manifesting them that she had by this time rendered herself exceedingly obnoxious to me. The very sound of her voice at a distance went to my heart like an arrow, and made all my nerves to shrink. And as for the beautiful young lady, of whom they told me I had been so much enamored, I shunned all intercourse with her or hers, as I would have done with the devil. I read some of their letters and burnt them, but refused to see either the young lady or her mother on any account. This is the end of Part 7 of Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner by James Hogg. Thank you for listening.